So we start, like I said, we start with baggage, and every one of us have got some things in our life that we just kind of need to let go of. It's the old thing of you just need to let it go. So let's pray together before we start, okay? Father, you know that each and every one of us that are human, Father, that we are infected with sinful desires. And you know that often we choose to stir up these bad attributes in and out of our lives. And God, we ask today that you would show each and every one of us, Father, that when these attributes that come up, help us to show us, Lord, how to flee from them. And Lord, replace them with things that you want replaced in our life. And give us more of your own qualities, God, that we need. Father, allow us, God, to show others what Christ looks like and how to really seek his guidance, that in everything we do, that you help us with the baggage that we have in our life, Lord, the things that need to be gotten rid of. And Father, we ask it all in thy Son, Jesus' name. And all God's children said. We start with, it's on the desk. We start with this morning, go to scriptures in Ephesians chapter 4 and verses 31 and 32. And Paul, talking to the church at Ephesus, in some ways is talking to us. Because look at what he says. He says to let all bitterness, anger, and wrath, shouting, and slander, he said, let that all be removed from you, along with, he says, all malice. And what? Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as God also forgave you in Christ. So let me start by sharing a story with you. I was called to preach when I was 16, and I was preaching in the church where I was at from 16 to 18, went into the service at 18. We started looking for a church. We went to a couple Southern Baptist churches, didn't like it, and so we ended up at a Free Will Baptist church. Kind of liked it because service kind of reminded us of the church that we grew up. I was preaching there, and one day I got called on the carpet by the pastor of the church and the deacon of the church, telling me that I was preaching something that they don't believe in their church. And I said, well, I believe it. And they said, well, we don't, so you can't really preach here anymore. Okay, that's fine. So I go to Europe. I got to preach a little bit in the Southern Baptist Church. Got out of church from about late 77, early 78, and really didn't get back into church. We came back in 1980 and probably did not get back into church about till 81, I think it was. We go back to our home church. Well, there's another guy there. He's preaching, and so what happened was the pastor would preach on Sunday morning, and then on Wednesday night and Saturday night, he would let one or the other of us preach. And so what we would do is we would alternate. Whoever preached on Wednesday night, the other person got to preach on Sunday night. Well, what ended up happening a lot of times was when it was the other guy's time to preach on Wednesday night, he would invite people to come in here and preach, and they would all come on Saturday night. So he would ask, he'd say, hey, Chuck, I've got a lot of people, my friends, wanting to come here and preach. Can I preach tonight? Yeah, go ahead. Well, then on the Saturday nights that it was mine, there would be every once in a while, there was one guy that I knew that everybody loved and respected in the church. We were sitting there one night on a Saturday. We were sitting next to the guy's wife, and they sent their little kid in. And the little boy walked up. I'm sitting there. He asked the preacher's wife, the other guy's wife, who's preaching tonight? And they said, well, Chuck is. And they said, okay, bye. We'll see you later. We're not going to stay. So they just left. I got hurt. Really got hurt. I got bitter because this guy knew, number one, that we were taking turns. I could do the same thing and invite my friends on Saturday night and say it's my turn to preach. But they would do it. So that went on and went on and went on, and then all of a sudden it was, okay, I got called to preach, and I thought, okay, I'm going to fix you all. I'll get a church, and I'll go preach somewhere where somebody wants me. Well, he ends up getting a church first. He goes to Kentucky, and the guy had a lot of charisma and everything, and had the dark eyes and was tall and good looking and really had a draw. But that good looking and draw got him into trouble. But there was always me to fall back on. So finally, I was called to Taylor's Grove, and I was going to go there to pastor, and it was a small church. There was 11 people that voted. That's how many people voted for the pastor. They had gone from about 50, 60 people down to like 15. So I did that. I got voted. I went there Wednesday night and was telling the pastor, well, this is going to be my last service because I'm going to go pastor out at Taylor's Grove. And he said to me, I wish you wouldn't. He said, because I'm resigning from the church Sunday. And I wish you would stay. And I thought, oh yeah, now you want me to stay. I could stay, but you never ever wanted me to stay before. No, that's okay. I'm going to go somewhere else. And I had a lot of bitterness for a long time. I was going to prove to them that they were all wrong. And that bitterness stood for a long time. That baggage, in some ways, also got in my way. Because what happened was, we started preaching in that church, and we said, okay, we're going to do a VBS. They said, okay, we only have about 10 kids show up. I think we had like about 50 or 60 showed up. We started Awana. And in Awana, we were running Awana on Monday night. And the problem was we didn't have any room. We had run out of room because we had a revival that started in September, and it went for 3 straight weeks. And we said we would stop the revival if nobody got 2 straight days, nobody got saved. The first night, nobody got saved. We thought this is going to be the shortest revival we ever had. 2 services, we're done. Well, the next night somebody got saved. Next night somebody got saved. Next thing we know, we've run for 3 straight weeks. We've had an increase in the church of over 50-some people. So we've gone from 11, 12 people. Now we're up to 60-some. We have VBS. We got all these kids. Everybody's flooding in. And I'm thinking, yeah, y'all thought I couldn't do it. I'll show you all. And I was still bitter because there were some of those preachers that still wouldn't let me preach in their church. And I said, I'll show you all. For a long time, that really caused a lot of trouble. And sometimes people think that you're the only ones that have issues and you're the only ones that's got baggage. No, we got baggage too. And there are times we got to get rid of that baggage. Once I got rid of that baggage, God has blessed immensely. In the last, that was 1986, I think, when we started there. And so we're right at now 35 years, I think. The church that we started in that I grew up where the pastor resigned. That church is closed down. It's no longer in existence. Taylor's Grove is no longer in existence. But Faith is in Richmond, and Calvary is here. So I had to learn to get rid of myself to really allow God to use me. And that's, so when the sermon, I can talk to you about this sermon. I can give you my life story about baggage. And so when you say, well, why are you talking to me? Because I've already preached this thing to me and understood. And sometimes you don't understand it. A lot of times the sermons that we do are not just to you. It's, I could entitle this "Been There, Done That," but I'm not, because today it's just entitled, you really need to let it go. You see, because right now, there's probably a lot of you that are sitting in this congregation, listening on Facebook, wherever. You probably got years and years of baggage that you've accumulated. And what's happened is, all through the years, you really could get by with a night bag if you really tried. But because of all of the baggage that you got, you're carrying around 3, 4, 5, 6 suitcases. And you're needing a U-Haul to get your baggage where it needs to go. And the thing about it is, you just need to release it because it's weighing you down. Matter of fact, if you really think about it, you probably don't have enough money to pay to put your baggage on the plane to go anywhere. So you're kind of stuck where you're at. And you need to move on. And the only way to do that is you've got to learn, as Paul said, there's certain things that we need to do. Some of the baggage he talks about here is bitterness, anger. Because sometimes that bitterness and anger is because of past pain. I don't know anybody that has not experienced some kind of pain. You were in the 5th grade, or you were 5 years old in kindergarten. You were a young man or a young lady, and you just had a crush on that little girl sitting in front of you with the really nice, pretty, beautiful blonde hair and blue eyes. Or you had this real cute boy. He was the best looking boy in kindergarten. And you thought, wow, I'm going to get married to that person. And one day you're out there on the playground and it's recess time, and you go running over and he's sitting next to another little girl, or your girlfriend is sitting there next to a little boy, and then you just go home screaming and crying to your mom and dad, and my heart is just broken. How comes? What happened? Did somebody pick on you? No, he don't love me no more. She's sitting with another boy. I don't want to go to school no more. I just want to cry. And your mom says, how about if I fix you your favorite meal? Cool, that's good. But yet later on in life, we go through and we remember that because another of those incidents happened. You had a job. You were working with someone, and you thought you could trust them. And you come to find out they were stabbing you in the back talking to the boss. Doing things deliberately to make you look bad so that they could get your job or that they could get promoted and you not. Times when you got angry with your brother or your sister because they did something to you and lied. And you got in trouble for it. And so many times you just say, you know what, I don't like you anymore. or later on when you get older. They do things and we all get angry and mad at them. Or you come to church. I was going to sing that song next week and somebody else sung it. How dare them do that? I just can't believe it. They know that's my song. I've been talking to them all week, the song that I'm going to sing, and they never one time told me, well, that's the song I'm singing this week. And so many times we look at these things in this baggage that we carry around and we just won't let it go. And what Paul says is this: you have to choose to be kind and forgiving. Do you know that? You don't have to choose to get mad. It happens. You don't have to choose to get frustrated. It will happen. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a natural tendency of us low-life sinners, which is what we are until Jesus comes into our life. And what happens is, instead of changing, we still allow the pain and the frustration to cause bitterness. Churches that split. People won't talk to each other. They sit on opposite sides of the church. And if the other person comes in, it's like, don't even sit near me. I wish you would come to another service. Which you come to the 9:30 and I'll come to the 11. That way we don't even have to look at each other in the parking lot. You know? And it begins to do this. So what does Paul say? He says this: what is the baggage that we carry around that we need to get rid of? And so you want a checklist? You're probably going to check all of them. Bitterness, anger, rage, brawling. You say, well, I don't fight with anybody. Oh, how many times are you like Joe Biden? I want to take you out back and just punch you out. And I look at him, and he's 80-some years old, and I think the only thing you're going to punch is air. And then you need to be careful because you're going to have a heart attack when you really throw that first one. Or slander. You get mad at somebody and you're talking to somebody else about that person. And what do you do about that person? Can you believe what they did? I think I shared a story with you. When I was at Taylor's Grove, there was a young man who had a father who had left his kids at home. And he had gone to the bar, and his brother-in-law came and got me and said, hey, can you go with me? He's sitting at the bar. He's drunk there in Camden, and can you go with me? And I said, well, yeah. And I knew why. Because the guy was an alcoholic, and he knew that if he went into that bar by himself, there was a possibility he was going to sit down next to his brother-in-law and sit down and drink. And so we go in there, and like I said, I don't frequent a lot of bars, and especially in Camden, I always went eating where nobody would know me. But you're there, and everybody knows, unless you've never been in a bar, for some reason, in a bar, they always have this step up. And I'm thinking, after a while, that's stupid. Because drunks are going to come out there and they're going to stagger and fall. So why would you want to have a step down or step up in a bar? But anyway, they did. So I had the guy on one side, he had him on the other, and we were walking him out. I forgot about the stoop, and I stumbled out onto Main Street in Camden. Saturday night, by the time I got to church on Sunday morning, we need to have a vote because our pastor was seen stumbling out of the bar last night. Nobody had bothered to call me and ask me why and what I was doing in a bar on Sunday night or Saturday night. And why did I trip and stumble? You know, they didn't. They just went ahead and started slandering me. And it's like, really? Number one, I don't like beer, never did like beer. Beer is nasty. I never drank wine, okay? But if you gave me vodka or rum and coke, I could handle that, okay? Generally about a full bottle of vodka and about 12 ounces of orange juice. But that was my past life. Do I do that now? No, I can't stand this stuff. You know, it's terrible. So, what do? The first step in all of this stuff is, number one, you've got to identify what it is you're carrying around. Because if you don't know what you're carrying around, how are you going to know what to let go? You say, well, what do you mean? I mean, if you've got an issue, you've got to address it. It's like an alcoholic. You can't fix an alcoholic until they realize that they're an alcoholic. Same thing with the drug addict. Same thing with the workaholic. Same thing with any kind of holic. Somebody that's got an addiction to something. Unless they realize they got an issue or problem, you can't fix it. Well, number one, you can't fix it. They can't fix it. Because they don't know that they've got the issue. We can't fix it. We try, but you can't. And so sometimes there are some things that as Christians you need to do. Number one, you need to bring the whole process to the Lord in prayer. So many times we try to do this, do that, and we forget to talk to Him about it. Now, He knows you've got the issue, even before you tell Him. What He wants to know is, do you know that you've got the issue? And if you do, He says, okay, here, I'll tell you what. I can help reveal what's in your life and show you what it is that needs to be touched here. And so many times we forget the first basic step of any of this as Christians is take it to Him in prayer. Number two is every once in a while you need to get a trusted friend. Now, let me say this to you all. I love you all. But there are some things, if I had an issue, I would not come and tell you. You want to know why? Because by Wednesday night, the whole church would know. And that isn't why I go to tell you what's going on in my life. That's why I say to you all, don't put your stuff on Facebook. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to put something on Facebook, and everybody's going to sit there and say, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you. If you need anything, talk. And the next thing you know, they're over here on a private message saying, do you know what Chuck just put on Facebook? I can't believe this. So over here's a side conversation going on about you that you thought was your friend, and the next thing you know, they ain't your friend. They're telling everybody else about you. So that's why you bring it to a trusted friend, somebody that's going to keep it and help you with it, not make fun of you because you have it. And there are things that we all have, and we don't share with everybody. We find a trusted friend that we're going to do. And then there are some times that, you know, even as Christians, we need to go to a counselor. But not just a counselor. It's someone that's going to give me some biblical counseling. It's going to help me walk through, because there's some things I need to know out of the Bible that is just there. Because how do I know this? Proverbs chapter 11 and verse number 14. Here's what God says. He says, where there is no guidance, a people falls. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety or deliverance. In Proverbs chapter 19 and verse number 20, Look at what he says. Listen to what? Listen to counsel and receive instruction so that what? You may be wise later in life. What did your parents try to teach you? How to behave? But can I actually tell you what a lot of your parents were teaching you? Not to do the same thing that they did when they were kids. Why? So that you could be wise later in life. And sometimes as kids, we don't realize that. We just think, Mom and Dad don't want us doing this because they want to take away all of our fun. You know? There was a reason that your mom and dad taught you that when the railroad tracks things are down or when the railroad lights are flashing, you don't drive over the railroad tracks. Right? Especially out in Camden when all they had was the lights, and those trains were 60, 65, 70 miles an hour coming down through there, and you're coming up on that road and you're looking down there and you think you're okay, and the next thing you know, here's a train right on you. And you're doing your best praying to God to get across there so that when you get home you have to change your underwear. Because that's generally what's going to happen. But look at what he says in Proverbs chapter 19 and verse number 20. He says this. Listen to counsel. 20 verse 18. I already gave you 19:20. In Proverbs 20 verse 18 it says this. Discipline your son while there's hope. Don't set your heart on being the cause of his death. Now, it says son here, but it actually means your child. Discipline your child while there is hope. Because if you don't discipline your child, you can be the cause of their death. And sometimes as parents, it breaks our heart. Sometimes as pastors, it breaks your heart to sit down and talk to someone face to face. Hey, we really need to talk because here's what I see coming, and here's what's going on. So what do we need to do? We need to identify the problem. Second thing you need to do is you need to bring it into the light. What does that mean? It means you've got to let it go. The first thing you got to do is you identify it. Now you got to let it go. 1 John chapter 1, verses 6 through 9 says this. If we claim to have fellowship with him, yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from all sin. He says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us of our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. So what do? If we identify it and we tell him this, guess what he says that he can do? He can purify us. It's the same thing. If I was to take this water and just take a drop of food coloring and put it in here, what happens to it? It changes color. Can I ever take that drop of water out of there? Only if I run this water back through some process of purification. If I run the water back through some type of purification, I can bring it back to a clear water. This is what it says that Jesus does. If you will go to him and talk to him about the issue, the problem that you have, and when you're talking to him, you ask him, hey, can you help me with this? What he does, ladies and gentlemen, is he takes your spirit and purifies it, and guess what? It comes back to a clear water without the impurities. But he won't do it if you don't take it to him, even though he knows that it's there. You know you got a problem. Well, let me say this. First of all, Jesus knows you have a problem, and you don't think you have a problem, and he's trying to tell you you've got a problem, and you keep trying to tell him, no, I can handle this, and he keeps trying to tell you, no, you can't, and you keep telling him, oh, yes, I can, because I really don't see it as a problem. And he says, you have no clue what you're talking about. Oh, yes, I am. I'm smarter than you, Jesus. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You think it's an issue. I don't think it's an issue. Leave me alone. So the more that he leaves us alone, the dirtier it gets with the water. Because every time we keep adding more and more and more and more and more until all of a sudden it's nothing but mud or very dense. You can't see it. And what Jesus is saying is, if you give it to me, what I'll do is I'll run it through my purification system. And when I run it through my purification system, it's going to come back out the way it should have been, and you'll be okay. But only if you'll come to me, because he says he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. He didn't say part of it. He said all of it. So whatever it is, he says, you got to give it to me. The book of Colossians, chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. He says this, that you have been rescued from the dominion of darkness, and that you and I share in the inheritance of the saints in the kingdom of light. What's happening is we want to walk around in darkness. He says, no, I want to show you the light. So when we look at these things of bitterness, anger, malice, slander, and all of that, that is nothing but the world. So the question is, do you still want to be part of the world or not? So if we don't, we got to get rid of this stuff. And it's hard because we're still here. So how do I do this? What did Paul say in the very beginning? He said, you need to trust me. You need to trust him. So, it took a while for me to learn a whole lot of trusting about Jesus. Let me continue with my story. We had been at Taylor's Grove about 3 years. Was there in got there in July of '86, and in May of 1989. It had rained pretty heavy the week before Memorial Day. It had been raining that week. The ground had become saturated. We had a basset hound that we kept outside, tied up, and in the back was a low place, and there was a creek right next to it. That's where we baptized, 4 Mile Creek. Okay, so we're there, and what had happened was it had rained during the week, and I go out there, and that poor little basset hound was doing his best trying to get out of the water. Okay, and so what I did was the water was coming up, so I went ahead and untied the basset hound, and I moved her cage up to in front of the house, and had her there, and she was fine. Well, it was early on Friday, right before Memorial Day weekend, and had someone knocking on our front door, and they were saying, "Hey, you need to get your dog." And I thought, this basset hound had learned how to untie herself. She would just roll over and get the chain in her mouth and unhook her leash. And she did this a couple times. By the time I got back around the house, she would meet me at the front door. And I said, you got to be kidding me. She's got loose again. And she said, no, you don't understand. She wants loose because the water's coming up in the back. And she's trying to get out of there, and she can't. So I had to go around there and untie the dog. Well, later on, I think it was that evening, the rain just started pouring down. And I was in the house watching the water rise in the back. And it got to a point where I went in and I got my son Tim and Tom and Charlie and my wife Diana and a dog, and we had a church van, a van, and a car, I think. And so we got the car in the church in the our van, and I got the kids. Diana drove one, I drove the other. We got the kids out, got the dog out. By the time we came back down to get the church van, there was no getting to the church van. You couldn't. The water had just flooded everything. We lost everything. I mean, totally everything. We started to rebuild because that used to be the old church, and we were living there in a house, and it now had been flooded. We were going back in to live, and some people were very angry with us, and this is where we talk about the bitterness. There were some people that were very angry with us because, number one, the church had given us this building. How dare the church give us this building? Because their grandmother had laid the block of that building. And it didn't belong to the church to give it to us. Yes, it did. But we couldn't do anything, and they knew it because it was in a floodplain. And because it was in a floodplain, you couldn't rebuild unless you elevated the whole building above the flame, and we would have had to elevate it like 6 feet. Okay? It was getting close to school. We had no place to live. We had sold our house in Fairfield, and all we had was this place where we were living there in the parsonage. And these people, they just threw us out. You got till, I think they gave us 2 weeks to find a place. We looked everywhere. I mean, everywhere. To find a place to live. We were trying to keep our kids in the Talawanda School District. And we just couldn't. Until it was like, I think, the weekend before, there was a house right down the street from us on the other side that was for sale. It was an old farmhouse built in the 1805, 1803, something like that. And the guy had it up for sale, but it was coming out of contract. He said, let it come out of contract. You can talk to me, and we'll see what we can do. We actually ended up getting the house on a land contract to buy for 15 years because we didn't have any money to put down. We didn't have a dime. So what? Now I'm more to some people because they have not only affected me now, they have affected my kids and my family. And as far as I'm concerned, I may have been a preacher, but as far as I'm concerned, those people could go straight to hell because you don't mess with my family. But God gave us a place. God did it. And when I learned to let it go, God knows how to fix it. And that's why you've got to learn to trust him. We didn't have any clothes. I mean, we didn't have any clothes. All of our clothes was soaked with fuel oil and muddy water. Our furniture was soaked with fuel oil and muddy water. The others that weren't soaked, they have been ruined. Pictures of all my kids were all in there, and they all got stuck together. We didn't have baby pictures. They were all gone. Wedding pictures, everything. Memories, all gone. Learn to trust him, and guess what? I got more now than I've ever had in my life. I've been broke. I've been without a job. But I've learned that if I trust him, he makes it all right. And as long as I don't, these people today, I'll see them and they'll, oh, how are you? And it's fine. But I have to tell you, every once in a while, the first thought that I have is, why are you still living? But then I have to think for a minute, no, God, you need to remove this and move this away. And he does, because I trust him in these things. And some people say, well, you keep talking about it because you're carrying bitterness. No, I keep talking about it because you can't forget it. It's how do you react when it comes up. You can either let it control you, or you can learn that it's Satan trying to control you. And so if you don't let him control you and let God control you, it will come up, but it won't affect you. I could stand here today and say, I have every right in the world to be absolutely bitter and angry and mad at everybody. But why? I want to live a little bit longer. Because my question to you this morning is this. Do you trust him? Because John says this. He says, the thief comes to kill and to destroy. But Jesus says, as I've come that they may have a life. And to have it more abundantly or to the full. What God wants you to do, ladies and gentlemen, and that is this. He wants you to live your life to the fullest. So that at the end of the day, there are no regrets. When you lay down, the only regret should be, sorry, Lord, I didn't have enough time for you today. And if you come to the end of the day and you say that to him, you got a problem. But if you've lived your whole day in him, you will find you'll have more time to do a lot of things. Because he'll give it to you. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Now, I have a lot of people talk about this verse, about these cloud of witnesses. And let me say this to you all. You'll hear a lot of people tell you that that cloud of witnesses is those people that are up in heaven and they're watching your life. Don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because they would see how miserable we are sometimes. And they would think, I thought I taught them better. So here's what I believe. I believe that you and I, that call ourselves Christians, there's a whole bunch of people out here watching us. And they're watching how are you going to react. Like in the election. There was a bunch of people that call themselves Christians and was posting out on Facebook that they wished that Joe Biden was dead. I don't wish he was dead. I don't like his policies. I don't like his politics. I don't agree with him on certain things. But it isn't Joe Biden that I'm disagreeing with. It's a whole platform of people. And please let me understand. My political beliefs, my beliefs that I disagree with is both Republican and Democrats. I'm not preferring one over the other. I have a problem with both of them, as we've been talking. I wish there was a third party. And the third party is, let's give this stuff back to the American people. Let's get rid of politicians, period. Because, in essence, the government gets their power from us. We don't get our power from them. So it should be that way. So I just disagree with it all because I think it's headed in the wrong direction. So people are watching us. How are we going to react? How are we going to do this? And what they're saying is, hold on a minute, you're calling yourselves Christians. How are you reacting to all of this? But it's not just this. I'm talking about your life. You tell somebody you're a Christian, and they're watching your walk. And let me say this to you. They're waiting for somebody to tell them about Jesus so that they can bring up, oh yeah, you call yourself a Christian, let me talk to you about the person that I just talked to. This is why he says, when we run the race, you better be careful because you got a whole bunch of people watching you. And they are. So my question to you is, the baggage that you've got that you need to get rid of, what are you going to do? He says, let it go and trust me. Trust me. Trust me. I'm not going to tell you everything's going to be okay, but I will tell you this, you're going to feel a lot better. You'll feel a lot better. Because you'll be able to start seeing some things a little bit more clearly. So as Melba's playing, my question to you is this. What are you going to tell him right now? The altar is open. You got a need, you want to pray? Come.